Okay, so in the last video, I fixed the problem with the transform on the parent object of the TIE fighter so that my transform's forward is pointing in the correct direction. If your model's transform for the parent object does not have the blue stick facing to the front towards forward, please watch my previous video and make sure that you got that transform fixed. It also goes over how to export the model out of Blender and into Unity. You need to make sure that the parent object's transform has the positive z-axis pointing in the forward direction. All right, with that said, let me go ahead and move this thing much closer to where my current plane is. And I'm probably going to have to make a few adjustments here because, compared to my plane, it's massive. So if that happens to be the case with your model, you'll need to scale things down so that they'll fit a little bit better. Make these changes to the parent object and they'll get migrated down. So what I tried was zero 0.5. So I scaled it down by 1/2, and that seemed to work pretty good. Uh, it gave it about the same size that I want it to be. I'm going to move it over here where my airplane is, and I do want to make sure that it's rotated so that forward is pointing in the right direction, and so that's going to be like a negative 180 on that. Grab my move tool, move it this way, and then that's from the front view, from the side view. There we go. Kind of lines up with the middle of my airplane. Now I'm going to move it up a little bit into the air. And then what I'm going to do with my plane pivot, I'm going to move my plane pivot off to the side. Eventually my plane pivot's going to be out of there. Back into perspective here. So now my TIE fighter's taking over the location here that my plane pivot used to be in. And I've scaled it to a nice size. And most importantly, the blue axis, the positive z-axis, is pointing in the forward direction. Now, on my particular model here, my TIE fighter does not have a fire transform applied to it yet. So, and also I need to make sure that my mesh is not stuck in my runway. So I'm going to move it up just a little bit more. And let's see. I'm going to have to move my target balloon up a little bit too, just so that it's going to line up with where my fire transform is going to be. So on my TIE fighter, the fire transform needs to go on my TIE fighter right down there. That's where my weapon is. I've already built it onto the TIE fighter model. So I need to get an empty game object with its forward facing in that direction down in that location. So on my TIE fighter, I'm going to right click it and I'm going to create an empty. And the empty is going to be called fire transform. And I didn't spell fire very well. Fiori transform. All right, so fire transform. This should have, by doing this while you were like right clicking on the TIE fighter, it will create that object as a child of the TIE fighter. It'll also place it at 000, right in the same location as the parent object. So since I've placed this thing, I can move this down and then look at this from the side and kind of zoom in a little bit here and get this thing placed like right there towards the end. And if I get into a nice orthographic view right here, I can look at it and that's looking pretty good. And then from the bottom, that's going to be from down there. If I can get through the runway, there we go. And to the bottom of my aircraft, there we go. So yeah, it's lined up pretty good. So I've got that fire transform lined up. The blue axis, the z-axis, is pointing in the correct direction. And so for my TIE fighter, we're going to need that fire transform here in a little bit. I'm going to apply my overrides so that now my prefab of my TIE fighter is up to date. And then what I'm going to do is, let me move my plane pivot right here, right next to my TIE fighter. And I'm just going to collapse all these components. And I'm going to collapse my TIE fighter. What I need to do is I need to get all the components off my plane pivot. Let me make sure that all the overrides, yep, no overrides. So everything is up to date on my plane pivot. I'm going to copy the component. I click the three dots here, and I'm going to click Copy Component off my plane pivot, go to my TIE Fighter, and I'm going to click these three little dots and paste component as new. And that's going to paste the plane pivot script right there for me. Okay, groovy. Back to the plane pivot object. I'm going to copy the component for the plane shooting script. Come back to the TIE Fighter. Click the three dots. Paste the component as new. And now my plane shooting script has become part of my TIE Fighter. Apply my overrides here. Then I want to go grab my audio source from the plane pivot RB. Click the three dots, copy the component. Come back to the TIE Fighter. And I'm going to paste the component as new. Now there's going to be some things I'm going to have to fix up, because when I copied this audio source over, my plane shooting script, it's got the wrong fire transform and it's got the wrong shooting audio source linked up here, because I've now moved it to my TIE Fighter. So what I'm going to do here is, in my TIE Fighter, I'm going to drag its fire transform into the fire transform slot. So now when I shoot my TIE Fighter, it's going to know the proper transform to use, the fire transform off of itself. And then its audio. Right now, the audio that it wants to use is the plane pivot RB's audio. We want it to be this audio. I'm going to drag that and drop it right there. I want it to be the TIE Fighter's audio source. And so now my prefab is up to date here. I'm going to click Override to apply all the overrides. Then I'm going to select my plane pivot, and I'm going to delete it from the hierarchy. So now my plane pivot is deleted from the hierarchy. And then I'm going to get my camera. Maybe move my camera up a little bit. Better view right here. And then let me get the play button, and let's see what happens. All right. Well, things are looking good. If I press the F key, pew, still blows up my balloon. And if I start using my controls for flying, it will now fly. Pew, 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 pew. So that's all there is involved in making your model into the model that will be replacing your plane pivot, so that you'll be flying now with your model. It amounted to basically copying all the components off of the plane pivot game object and applying those components to your custom vehicle, making a few modifications here on the plane shooting script to make sure you have the correct fire transform and that you have the correct audio source. All right, that's going to be it. Thanks.